On Friday, June 27th, the Supreme Court is going to announce their ruling on nationwide injunctions. This came from Donald Trump's executive order to try to get rid of birthright citizenship, which is protected by the 14th Amendment. In order to get ahead of any confusion, misinformation, or panic, I want to walk through the three possible outcomes. First, it's critical to remember that the court is not ruling as to whether birthright citizenship is constitutional or not. It obviously is, and that's why the nationwide injunction was put there by a federal judge in the first place. Because all an injunction actually is a federal judge saying, I think this is bad, so we should stop the government from doing it until we get a final ruling. And injunctions are not a partisan issue. Republicans used them aggressively during the Obama and Biden presidencies, and Democrats have used them to delay some of Trump's worst policies, notably in this case and also in layoffs and federal spending cuts. So the first option, and really the only option that should be on the table, should be a 9-0 ruling in favor of nationwide injunctions. Because yes, judges have power, and it should be at their discretion to temporarily pause a new law from taking effect, whether it's from a Republican or a Democrat, if they believe that law is unconstitutional or poorly written so that it accidentally inflicts damage on people. Now, like I said, the justices should decide this as a 9-0 decision, because not only will it immediately prevent Trump from withdrawing citizenship for immigrants, but it will ensure that all of those other critical injunctions stay in place until a final ruling is issued. Injunctions also protect the court from an insane caseload, because when there's not an injunction, what you instead get is 1,000 or 1,000,000 different people all filing lawsuits against the government at once. But with at least 4 or 5 judges on the Supreme Court firmly loving Donald Trump, we have no real clue how they're going to vote. Now, the second option here is a decision where they limit some nationwide injunctions. In this case, they might choose to protect injunctions regarding core constitutional rights, but limit injunctions on topics that are maybe less critical. This feels like the most likely option because it would protect injunctions related to things like speech, religion, and citizenship, but maybe dial back some of the partisan abuse of injunctions. This would also allow them to look like they're compromising and like they're moderate, which could potentially keep both sides happy. Although, let's be honest, Trump is going to shit his pants if they shut him down one way or the other. Of course, the third option would be a catastrophic fail. Any decision to eliminate nationwide injunctions entirely for federal judges would expose millions and millions of Americans to all sorts of abuses from the government. It would neuter the power and legitimacy of the judicial system, and at the same time, it would open up the floodgates to thousands, if not millions, of new lawsuits to hit the courts, completely burying judges in work and grinding the entire judicial system to a halt. But while this sounds scary, the Supreme Court has a pretty clear reason to not take this path, because not only would they be putting citizens at risk, they would also be creating an enormous amount of work for themselves, because ultimately all the lawsuits resulting from those bad laws are going to have to work their way through the court system to the Supreme Court. And at that point, actual damages could have occurred, putting the federal government at risk to have to pay out a lot more in penalties. But remember, even in this worst case scenario, they are still not ruling on birthright citizenship itself. What would then happen is there would be thousands, if not millions, of lawsuits against the government on behalf of people who were born here. That class action lawsuit would then have to ultimately reach the Supreme Court, and at that point, they would have to choose, are they going to defend the Constitution or abandon it? I am not a judge or a lawyer, but I do know where to get good information, so if you want to know what happens next, check out my page Friday afternoon.